welcome in. So great to see you again. So, how are you doing? Yeah. Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I know that you wanted to talk about your social awkwardness a little bit today. Even though it's not really something we want to talk about, it actually does a lot of benefit to talk about it. For your mental health, for your emotional health. Yeah? Right. So, I'm guessing what brought you here today was social anxiety, right? How to deal with it. Yeah. It is slightly a niche thing, but it's also quite a lot more common than you would think. Yeah, there's a lot of contributing factors, and it's different for everyone what those contributing factors actually are. So, I wanted to ask you, see where we should start with this. Sometimes what can happen, and this is where I want you to give me a little bit of input, if that's okay. What can happen is that we get trapped in a mindset, in a way of doing things that goes back to when we were younger and we first experienced some kind of social trauma. So maybe you can be thinking about that, where that might have occurred for you, whilst I tell you about how this plays out, how it affects us. So that with this information, you can start to become a bit more confident about where you're at. Not try so hard to run from it, not try so hard to change it, but actually just start to accept it and be okay with where you're at. That is actually the most important part of this first step that we take toward transforming social anxiety into potentially social elation. No, don't worry, we'll get there. We'll get there one day. For now, it's just about making sure you feel safe and you feel comfortable when you're socializing with people, okay? That's not always going to happen because it might not be a good idea to be safe. You might actually need to, do a bit of a run or do a bit of a fight, but, 98, 99% of the time, you basically just need to be present and be there. And it's hard to be present when we are triggered, because what tends to happen is our mind goes back to a time when we were younger potentially, or when something traumatic happened, and it tries to use the same coping mechanisms that it used back then to deal with the situation. Your brain's a little bit like a computer in that way. If a program comes up and it startles it, it'll just revert back to Windows 5 or something, to give an analogy. And what this can mean is that during a time in your life where maybe your social skills, I wouldn't say they stop developing, because honestly, living in this world, unless you're living in a forest with not even contact with animals or not even speaking to yourself out loud, then you're probably going to be developing some social skills. But for you, maybe there was a time where you kind of did, fall back, let's say, on socializing, as in you drew away from it, right? And what happened during this stage, what could have happened is that you were working on some other skills, right? So if you've spent, what you think is a fair amount of time not socialising in your life, missing out on those key skills that you get when you pick up on social cues and learn how to carry a conversation, a good conversation, you're more than likely during that time we're developing other skills. Yeah? Good, yeah. It's really good to recognise that. Yeah, because it's not like there's no way that you can still learn these social skills. There is, actually. But because when you're triggered, you might revert back to teenage you, kind of does one of the flight, fawn, freeze, flee aspects. What we want to do is just come one step away, one step closer to your current self. So we do that by recognizing that this is potentially what's happening when you're getting a lot of social anxiety. So what might be happening is that your brain reverts back to Windows 5, right? And that's not a bad thing. It's trying to cope with the situation. The part that's trickier, perhaps, is that your adult self, your current self, wants to evolve, wants to get better in its skills, right? And it's just that. So if you find yourself not getting better, which is very rare, honestly, you're probably doing already better than you think. But if in your mind you're judging yourself, it gets hard to actually get to where you want to go, because you don't thrive in that state when you're judging yourself. You can only thrive when you're in love. A type of love is what's going to bring you closer to your goal when it comes to socialization. But what we want to do is take you out of Windows 5 mode and bring you into the safety of the here and now. So one of the ways that we can do this is when you catch yourself feeling a type of energetic drain from the fact that you maybe have to socialise and you think you don't want to, or you start to pressure yourself because you know that it's best for you to socialise, but all of your old scripts are coming up and you're reverting back. One of the things that I want you to remember and just really know, just really solidify in your being, is that it's okay to be socially awkward. It's okay that you didn't develop those skills to the level that you're happy with yet, because you're going to. When you're aware of the fact that you sometimes revert back in your skills, even though you're perfectly capable of having a great conversation, what's happening is a little bit of trauma getting in the way. We're just going to work to become aware of that trauma and appreciate where you are. There's no point in trying to change it or run from it. In meditation, that's one of the big things, is that you don't try and get anywhere. You don't try and change anything. You're just trying to become more aware of where you're at, right here and now. Yeah? Comfortability is one of the big ones when it comes to being social now. One of the things that happens when you're harshly judging yourself, when you're being social with people, is that you start to think on some level that you're socially inept, that you can't hold conversations, that you can't hold eye contact, that you're a failure in some way, that you can't follow social cues. But that's just the trauma talking. And sometimes, yes, there is generally something wrong, i.e. there's a mental issue going on that can cause those types of things as well. But it's not an issue until it's not the issue, it's not because of this issue that we should judge ourselves. What we need to do is understand where we're at and not add all of these labels. Sometimes people need a diagnosis to help them get through something, and sometimes they genuinely just struggle as much as, or even more than what they've ever told anybody, and so a diagnosis can help them. But there's also one of the things that we forget is to diagnose, quote unquote, your abilities. So instead of looking at your disabilities, we ought to look at your abilities as well. We've got to make sure we're balancing them. Does that make sense? Because if you're really hard on yourself and you start thinking that you're really weird and you just need to isolate yourself because nobody's like you, and spiral out kind of thing, then you're telling yourself things that aren't true. And quite honestly, I've seen a lot of people, and you'd be surprised at how many more are just as uncomfortable on the inside as you are. Looks do not tell you what a person is feeling on the inside. Okay? And not only that, have a bit of a laugh with yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. If you're socially awkward, so what? It's not the end of the world. If you don't carry a very good conversation, if you don't really express your ideas sometimes, or your opinions sometimes, that's okay. One day you will. And when you do, everyone will listen. Well, the point is that you're listening to yourself and not try to get the approval of other people, because that's where judgment can come in. And not even try and get the approval of yourself, because sometimes yourself has some high expectations for you. So as long as you are recognizing where you're at, and you're accepting where you're at, and you're not trying to change it, you're just trying to accept it, there is where we can move. But if you're fighting against it, if you're thinking you need to be healed before you can do too much, that could be out of balance. I will say that there is a certain amount of protection you should give to yourself, boundaries you should give to yourself. You don't want to overfry your nervous system. You want to be at least neutral, alright? You want let's just take your central column of energy, your spine, for example. When you can just feel like everything's kind of just slightly like this, let's say, your spine is just slightly like a wave. It's coming in and out of anxiety and relaxation, and anxiety and relaxation. From there is where you can do whatever you want. And even when your line, let's say your central column of energy, will start to spike into anxiety, right there is where you want to express what's going on. Okay, whether it's to yourself or write it down. Sometimes when we get full of anxiety, our perfectionist side comes in and says, well, you're never gonna become better if you don't face it right here, right now. And again, balance is needed with this. Sometimes we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone to get anywhere. But on the other hand, don't push yourself so hard because it might not be the right moment for it. Synchronicity really helps with this. Knowing the right time will save you a lot of energy when it comes to sharing yourself with people. Knowing when to stay quiet and knowing when to speak up. Those two things are very important when it comes to feeling aligned, feeling joy, feeling loved toward yourself and other people. You can be introverted or extroverted, but let's take an extroverted person. You can be the most talkative person in the room. But what can happen is that you're still uncomfortable with yourself on the inside. So just because you don't speak very often doesn't mean that you're not very confident. Alright? Speaking less can show confidence. But, speaking less can also look like trying to withhold expressing who you are authentically. So it's all this, it's like a type of tug of war. Did you ever play that when you were a kid? Yeah, it's like a seesaw of energy. You're constantly going to be in flux. Don't worry about that. Just focus on acceptance with the moment. Good. I hope this can lift some weight off your shoulders. Because I know what it's like where you're putting tons of pressure on yourself to perform. That pressure can make it worse. Yeah, it can send you on a deep spiral, but you know what? There's always back up. When you've reached rock bottom, there's nowhere else to go but up. Right? So even that. Yeah, about knowing yourself. Exactly. Getting to know yourself. When your body's really shouting at you, like anxiety is really intense, sit with it and find out what it's trying to tell you. Try not to rush into either running away from it or rush into a situation that might, is what you think will solve it. Just be with yourself. I can guarantee that you'll learn a lot more, become a lot more comfortable with who you are when you do that. And situations will just arise naturally in the perfect time for you. When you've done the healing work, when you go into the micro healing aspect of yourself, the macrocosm starts to reflect that around you. So for example, if you are having a great day and you're just feeling really good about yourself and about life, the person next to you at the grocery store is just going to start talking to you, and it's just going to feel natural and normal, and you didn't have to force it, things like that. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because I know you said that sometimes it bothers you how often you're alone, because it feels like your social anxiety isn't getting any better. But I wanted to ask you about your dreams. What are they like? Do you remember any specific circumstances with being social in your dreams? Interesting, okay. Sometimes dreams are there to get us to do some deeper inner work. Nightmares usually will come as a type of, you've got something to release from you. Yeah? Neutral dreams, where they don't feel good or bad, is usually trying to balance you out, trying to help you learn a lesson of some kind, that you're doing really well on one hand, and on the other hand you've got some mirrors to look at in yourself, i.e. a person in a dream might represent an aspect in you that you've judged really harshly, and then in the dream you'll judge that person really harshly. And so it's just about recognizing that reflection. And then good dreams can be, as you say, where you're socializing with a bunch of people, and these people maybe used to be your enemies, and now you get to chat with them like they're your besties. And this kind of dream can actually feed into your real life, can give you energy during the day. So dreams are important to pay attention to. Dream therapy is a real thing, and with each one of those 3 categories of dreams, if you can find acceptance and you can appreciate the dream for what it's trying to show you, you can find inspiration. But it all comes with having to take radical responsibility. If you think you're ready for that, you'll get there. Listen, some days you're ready to take responsibility, other days you just need a bit more time. Yeah, like I say, just work here and now on not trying to perform when you're around people. You don't have to perform to anyone. You just have to be exactly with what you are. Now, I know that can seem counterintuitive, especially when we're at a job that requires us to put on a happy face all the time. I'm talking about your interpersonal relationships. People are going to appreciate you more, even if you have a down day, right, and you just seem moody. They're going to appreciate you more when they've seen all sides to you, and you're not just always showing the good side. They're going to appreciate you more when you challenge them, sometimes with a real belief that you have, not just because you're feeling like being an asshole, but because it's generally coming from something in you that wants to express itself, and you're open to hearing the other side, the other point of view. Yeah, it can be tough to challenge people, especially when you're just trying to stay safe. So I would recommend to stay safe first. Get yourself in a nice, comfortable space. Don't always feel like you've got to challenge the room. When you have social anxiety, you want to, first and foremost, come out of Windows 5, get into the present mode, come out of teenage or child you, and say, okay, well, I'm here now with my adult self, and we're okay. We don't need to be judged. We don't need to feel judgy. We just need to listen to our instincts and come back to center, ground. Know that the work that you're doing of knowing yourself is super important. And honestly, I would hazard a guess some of that social anxiety is on the other side of it is some of your genius. Yeah, untapped potential creative energy, because you feel deeply what other people are doing and going through. And as long as you don't think you have to mirror that all the time, you don't have to feel everything that everyone else is feeling in the room. Instead, you can hold your center. You're going to be able to hold the space and feel good about yourself, because you know where you are personally, where your emotions are, where your thoughts are. It's all about clear communication with yourself and where you're at. So just take stock before going to socialise where you're at, and then if your body's moving toward it, just let it go, let it flow. Probably go a lot better than you think. And sometimes it goes worse than we think, but even then, nothing to be afraid of. I know it's easier said though than done. But a lot of it is thought paradigm. A lot of it has to be rewired. So there's all kinds of different methods you can use for that. Whatever you feel drawn to, Because the only thing that's going to really change it is time. There's no one single meditation that is going to completely rid you of social anxiety, although there's things that can help. Yeah, every day there's a new chapter in the book toward your life that gets to become better with each passing page. Good, yeah, just clear some of that weight off you. Yeah, it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be exactly whatever you are in the moment. As long as you're trying to be a good person. You know, even if being a good person just looks like being present in the room. Even if you feel exceptionally uncomfortable. Just trying to carry a little bit of a conversation, or just trying to listen to what someone's really saying is all it takes. Yeah. Remember, it's about your abilities as well as your disabilities. Alright? Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm always here. Always here if you want to share your story in a safe space with other people that are going through a similar situation. Yeah, it's always good to share in a space where you feel comfortable. Yeah, people have a lot of different kinds of phobias, so just figure out what yours are when it comes to socialization, and then know that there's all kinds of things that you are great at that other people are not, and you start to balance out some of that low self-esteem that hit you when you had some bad social experiences. Yeah, and just work with your dreams tonight. Just see if you can remember anything from what happened in them, and just know that they're communicating with you where you're at. Okay, I'll see you next time. Okay, lots of love.